Buenas tardes, bona tarda, good afternoon. I know some of you, I'm going to be talking in English. I know some of you have been here all day, so thank you so much for having the patience and staying with us. I have asked both artists, as they have the conversation, to illustrate their work with 40 images that they're going to be showing at the background. So first we will have Michael Martin and after Fiona Ray, and they will go in a continuous loop. Michael was born in 1941 in Dublin, studied fine art at Yale School of Art and Architecture. He has lived and worked in Britain since 1966. He participated in the exhibition of British conceptual art, The New Art, at the Hayward Gallery in 1972. He has shown regularly in Europe and USA. He has shown in Spain in 2000 in a site-specific installation at Divan Valencia, invited by Enrique Juncosa, who also curated his retrospective at the Irish Museum of Modern Art, Dublin, in 2006. He has just recently celebrated his retrospective at the Royal Academy of Arts in London, which has covered 60 years of his career. The selection of images of Michael that he has chosen starts with a wall drawing, as a painting came later in his career. As he says, I see myself as a sculptor making paintings. His experience of space, presence, and objecthood come from the sculpture, not painting. Fiona Ray was born in 1963 in Hong Kong and studied at Goldsmith College in 1987, while Michael Martin was a teacher there. She was nominated for the Turner Prize in 1991 when she was still not even 30 years old. And her first solo show in European institution was at the Kunsthalle in Basel in 1992. Since then, she has regularly had solo shows in Europe and USA, having a permanent presence in Paris and New York. The selection of images that Fiona has given us is a glimpse of her distinctive body of work, full of restless energy, humor, and complexity, which has set out to challenge and expand the modern conventions of painting. She has chosen an example of her series of work that she has developed since the late 80s to now. Can we start the presentation, please? ¿Podemos empezar la presentación, por favor, de las imágenes?
Can that light be lowered a little bit, or is that too tricky at this point?
I think it's too tricky at this point.
Okay. It's quite good that I can't see the audience, actually.
So, in your lecture of post-painting, painting, and other thoughts, Michael, that you did a Tanzwit lecture at the Slade School of Fine Art, University College of London, that we translated to Spanish and was published in the Dardo magazine 36 that we published in 2020, that it kind of disappeared with the pandemic, but is there in Spanish. You analyze the conceptual condition of painting using as a key figure Andy Warhol and his work and the impact of the idea of painting. So any image can be a painting. What do you think of this conceptual condition of painting, and could the history of painting be seen as the most conceptual art that exists?
Well, where can I begin? Everything I understand about art has come from trying to be an artist, of trying to make art. I have theoretical interests, but all of my interests of that kind all arise from the nature of my own practice, the problems I confront, the things I see in other art through my own art. Everything I've done, I've curated, I've written, I've given talks. But everything comes back to what I've learned through my own work. And the reason why I wrote that lecture, it's now a long time ago. It was 1997,
yeah.
so it's 25 years ago. Some of it I agree with, some of it I've changed my mind. But one of the things that concerned me was that the art world at that time seemed to me to be divided between an idea of painting as representing something, and everything else was conceptual. So if you wanted to, something was either a painting or it was conceptual. It didn't matter whether. What I realized was that a lot of things that were called conceptual seemed to me to be very unconceptual, and there were paintings that I thought were really very conceptual, but they weren't considered conceptual because, of course, they were paintings, and that couldn't be. And I didn't like that contradiction. And I'm from the generation. The generation of the '60s, where there was the break between painting and other things. And up to the 60s, the history of Western art is really the history of painting, with some sculpture. Sculpture is added in, but it's always at the periphery. Essentially, the history of our art is painting. And the reason why painting was talked about as being dead at the end of the 60s was because for the first time it was truly questioned as having this central role. And it actually, for a period, lost that role. I'm not sure if it has completely, but it may have come back. But it will never be as absolute, as its hold on art will never be the same. And what the 60s did was it introduced the possibility of many other ways of being an artist, of making art. You could make art from different things. You see it in Jessica Stockholder's exhibition. There's many, many ways of being an artist. And it seems to me, and of course also, there are many, many ways of being a painter. And so that's really I hated the idea that painting was somehow not conceptual. It just seemed ridiculous to me, because the advantage of painting, as Fiona, you and I will both know this, there are wonderful advantages for an artist about painting. Yeah. It's a given format. They're rectangular. Occasionally there's a circle, but but that's interesting too, because that's a kind of weird aside from the regularity of the form. Yeah. They're on the surface, whatever they're made with. It's on the they're on the surface. It may be illusionistic. It may not be, but they're two-dimensional. We're talking about surfaces. We're talking about paintings that have been made out of paint, but actually paintings are made out of color. If there was no color, there'd be no paintings. They'd all be monochromes.
And was it important, while you were, teaching at the Goldsmith, for you as a student, Fiona, that you were at the painting department?
There was no painting department at Goldsmiths. Goldsmiths was very unusual for all the disciplines being in one course. There was no difference. You arrived and you found out which medium you were going to use, and you didn't arrive at Goldsmiths knowing what kind of tradition you were going to follow. You didn't think, I want to be a sculptor like Canova, or I want to be a painter like de Kooning. That didn't exist. You had to make up your own way, your own tradition.
And so when you arrived, were you clear that you wanted to be a painter, or there was kind of a doubt about it?
For me, I had no idea what I wanted to do. In some respects, at the time there was a fashionable German Neue Wilde painting group that I thought I wanted to be part of. Then I tried something else. I tried everything at Goldsmiths, and that was what its beauty was, that everything was open to you as a student to investigate and find out what to do. But sometimes I don't even know if I never really decided to be a painter, and even in all the decades since, I never really decided. It just happened to be what I get up in the morning and go and do. There's something interesting about it that keeps me engaged.
So both of you, I know Michael sees himself as an artist. Do you see yourself as an artist or as a painter?
Artist. I prefer that term. Painter, immediately, people then want to ask you watercolors or landscapes, and if you say artist, it's like a bit more open and mysterious and undefined. But yeah, I do think of myself as a painter, really, of course. But I'm a painter that keeps an eye on painting. So Michael says he's a sculptor that makes painting, and I think I'm a painter that watches myself painting. So I get the best of both worlds. I get to have a conceptual approach, but at the same time I get to use paint and get fully involved with it. So I do get to be Jackson Pollock and de Kooning in private, but I'm also being conceptually cool about it.
Shall we talk about Sky Shout that is upstairs, that is from 97. I mean, it was very nice last night because they met since, they haven't been seen the painting for a long time, both together at the same time in front of the painting. So Sky Shout represents also a kind of a key moment in UK, but when we were talking the other day, you would say that when you started the painting, you didn't have anything planned. You didn't draw. You just throw yourself to this lavish, where we don't know how to hold our eyes, in this black and white movement with these LEPs, sometimes circles, standing in the painting.
Yeah, I improvised everything. For decades, I just totally improvised in front of the canvas. I made no preparatory drawings, no preparatory paintings. And in fact, I guess that's what was useful about having a conceptual approach. I would at least, by experimenting, come up with some rules for each series. I've worked in series throughout my life as an artist, so and that will last maybe 10 paintings, 20 paintings, maybe more, depending on how interested I am. And yeah, I just totally improvised it from start. And I looked at it when I arrived here on, I guess, Wednesday, whenever it was, and I just can't believe I thought that was a good idea to improvise a 9-foot-high painting. I'm amazed that it was.
Well, congratulations, because it was very successful painting.
Well, thank you.
And I'm very, very impressed. And I was always impressed by it, because, you know, the thing that you're describing, of the kind of spontaneity that you're describing and the kind of approach to that naked canvas,
yeah,
and that daring that's involved, I don't do that. And to be honest, I don't do it because I can't do it. And I had to find another way of working. And, you know, in the images of my things, you'll see they start with the wall drawings. And I wanted to show that because it started as drawings in 1978. In the first few years, it was just wall drawings, which was black lines on a white wall done with tape on the wall. I became interested in the idea of representation. I was not interested in paint. It was not about painting. It was about representation and about how does representation work? How does the eye work? How do you perceive things? And it was 15 years later that I made the first painting that looks like this. You know, it took me 15 years, and it started with drawings, then it went into installations, like the installation that I did in Ivam. And from that, it came to me that when I did the installations, first of all, they were gigantic. They were temporary. They were massively difficult to do. You know, 1 week to install a giant thing. By the end, you're psychologically and physically exhausted and drained. And you can't change anything once you start because there isn't time. You've got to go right with what it is. And I thought, I want something that's more contained, more controllable. And of course, what's that called? Painting. And so,
welcome to the club.
The thing when I say about myself as a sculptor making paintings, I think I do something. I think my sense of space and objecthood is a sculptor's sense, and it's very difficult for me to describe. In a lot of the images that I've shown, I've found images where there are people in the picture. And the reason I've done that, I deliberately did that, because I'm trying to give you the scale of the work. Because my work in reproduction becomes graphic, and all becomes says you can't tell, is it gigantic or is it tiny? Are we looking at a postage stamp or something that's 4 meters wide? And they do vary in size. And so, because when you see them with the people in the pictures, as you will hear eventually, I am thinking all the time, what is the person standing in front of this? What scale is it to them? the image is life size. It's their life size. It's life size. It's bigger than life. It's smaller than life. Where is the viewer in relation to the thing they're looking at? This is not what most painters think about.
No, I think that for me, scale is something I like to play with scale within the paintings, and also I like the idea that the viewer isn't quite sure where the best place to stand is, so they don't know whether to come up very close and see the surface and the texture and the brush marks and all those things and detail, or they should be right at the entrance to the gallery seeing it from a distance of 30 feet. So I think that we have a very different approach.
It's a very, very different approach, and I think, and I think one of the things why I think this conversation about painting and about what we were talking about before is how extraordinarily rich the possibilities are, creative possibilities are, that are built into the nature of painting. That you can do, there's almost nothing creatively, visually, that can't be addressed some way, in my mind, through painting. You could probably find a way to do it. And that's one of the reasons why it has persisted in Western, why it's dominated and persisted Western art. And there will always be people, in my view, who want to paint.
Yeah.
You can tell them it's dead, it won't make any difference, because there will always be young people who will think, that's what I want to do.
Well, it's the human instinct for thousands and millennia to make their mark. And I think in the end that another huge difference between us is that I'm interested in the gesture and the brush mark, the physicality of how the paint is expressed on the canvas and what is then possible through that, rather than a painting as an image. The painting itself is multiple images made up of these very visceral physical moments and facture.
Which my work deliberately
eschews.
Excludes. I mean, actually, my work is very handmade. It's kind of tedious making them, in the sense that to make something that looks like it was like a machine made it is actually very time-consuming physically with your hands.
Yeah, mine are time-consuming too.
Yes, but you can see that in yours.
I would like, as it's coming now, the wall drawing and the Pompidou. You know, in '94, the Pompidou, it was a kind of breakthrough because you painted the walls. I mean, you jumped to the walls, as we see now, with some objects, and so suddenly you created a space that became a painting. It's a space that you come in and you are surrounded by a painting. Well,
again, you see, it's a sculptor's point of view. I make the installations so that, and what I discovered when I first painted those spaces was that the viewer was walking into the painting. If the room is painted and you go from room to room and there's images painted on the wall and you're in the room, it's like being in the painting. That again is a kind of sculptural sense of space. It's much more to do with it's an idea of space that really comes from minimalism, which is that in traditional sculpture, the sculpture holds its own space, creates a space for itself. Yeah. In minimalism, the space is the space of it as an object. It is its own real space, and its space is the same as you are in its space, because its space is not different than yours. And I've tried to do the same thing, but in painting.
Did that installation, in a way, make you jump to do kind of more brave color paintings? I mean, use color in a more bravery way than you have used it in the past? Because it's kind of a breakthrough.
I mean, when I first started using color, it started with the walls, and gradually it went into the images. And when I made the first rooms to paint, I just thought, well, I've got 7 rooms. I'm going to color and what I'm going to use. So I thought, well, red, yellow, blue, green, the normal colors. And I thought, well, I'll make them as bright as possible, so they're pure. And then I discovered there was a vocabulary in that very simple thing of 10, 12 colors. And the thing that, in all my things which are depictions of things, in the physical world of objects, things are differentiated by material. In a painting, in my work, the color represents the difference between French fries and cardboard. between the watch and the face of the watch and the thing, between the house and the sofa. The color is acting in place of physical difference.
I think I use colour in the paintings to represent itself, and then its associations beyond the painting all the time. So if you use pink, it refers to pink. It's very much about pink and the pinkness of pink. But then it's also a pink in a de Kooning. It's a pink in a girl's dress or a boy's dress. It has all these cultural resonances. And I think that one of the things I very much enjoy doing with painting is use inappropriate colour combinations, things that might be considered bad taste colour or something that isn't high art. And colour, and I think in that way, speaks so loudly. It's such a signifier of seriousness or lack of seriousness. And I think that for me, it's so interesting to see what I can get away with, to use colour in quite an iconoclastic way, and subject matter as well, I should add.
Fiona, it's very nice that you say it, because because painting is such a conventionality, the only way to do something different in painting is to break the convention.
Absolutely. And I remember that.
And what's great about it is it has conventions,
Yeah.
which means they're breakable. One of the problems about being a contemporary artist today is anything is possible. You can do anything you want.
But
it
that's
doesn't
a
have to
nightmare.
confront. Yeah, but it's an absolute nightmare.
It's a
Whereas
nightmare.
what painting does is it gives you a context, it gives you an orthodoxy, and you can follow that. You can follow it along its whatever historically justifiable lines that you want, or you don't have to. You can actually try to break with those things, but you get it. But it holds.
Yes.
Because of its orthodoxy, it holds that possibility of radicality.
Well, I think as a young artist learning to paint, of course, I read all the painting theory and the art historians, and actually I was very aware of, obviously, of Clement Greenberg's rules or Hans Hofmann's rules about what you should and shouldn't do in painting. And I just delighted in breaking those rules. I just thought, well, it's obvious. The rules are there to be broken, and you make up a bunch of new rules and you do your own thing. And I think that the more that you are aware of rules, the more interesting your position can become because of the possibilities for transgression. And then I started putting glitter on my paintings at one point, which horrified loads of people and delighted others, and all sorts of different ways of breaking the picture plane, the sanctity of the paint surface, the sanctity of the seriousness of painting. And I remember some Swiss curator said, "Oh, but my God, you've broken the picture plane." And for him, that was the end of. That was just the most appalling thing you could do. It's funny, isn't it? Painting's such a serious, high altar, high church thing, and yet it's also us scratching away, making marks, and expressing ourselves. So
I had a very, very conventional education in painting. When I was a student, I was a painting student. I did want to be a painter. I just turned out not to work.
Yeah.
But I do lots of things in my paintings now, which are doing exactly what I was told an artist should not do.
You shouldn't use black.
Don't have too many colors.
No black.
No black. Never put one thing in the middle of the picture. That is, don't be ridiculous. I mean, the whole idea of a painting is to have it a little off center. How to kill the space, put it in the middle. Something small in a giant space, please. There are so many things that you can that are and in a way, I think it's also important to understand that painting is a kind of metaphoric act. It's both a physical act and a conceptual, but it's also metaphoric. You're kind of acting out in one form things that might refer to something other.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful form for that kind of enactment.
Well, actually, what you were saying just brought to mind the idea of painting as playing, and actually seeing Jessica Stockholder's show. I'm just so reminded of the thing that I find relates to my own work was the idea of play and humor and the sense of the absurd that you can encompass with painting. And that in the end, as a grown-up artist, I actually go to a playroom and I carry on playing like a child with an adult's consciousness, I suppose, or maybe they're both side by side, but there's so much room for fun and amusement as well as seriousness. So
there's something I'm so pleased to see Jessica's work here, because what struck me in the context of our conversation is she's a sculptor with a painter sensibility.
Yeah, I think of her as a painter.
Right?
I mean,
they're paintings. They're paintings. They're just not painted.
Yeah, they're abstract paintings.
Yes,
yeah.
completely.
They're all abstract paintings.
Yeah,
and it's perfectly. It's such a good way of being able to see that what I mean by that. That she's the absolute opposite of me.
Yeah. And there's so much play in it, and there's so much breaking of the rules. It's not a rectangle on the wall, it's some funny bit of thrift store stuff with a little bit of embroidery and little details that make, if you notice them, you kind of fill in on the joke, and I think that's something that I share.
But also the whole use of space, and you see, what I was trying to say is, in my work, I need to use two different colors to represent two different materials, whereas she uses the materials.
Yeah, and I just use all the colours there are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, as it's 6 o'clock, shall we open to questions?
Or was that all very clear?
Have we said everything?
No, yes. It's because, I mean, I was told that we have a time. So shall we open to questions, or we'll keep going? They want more.
You want more? Oh.
Yeah. ¿Hay alguna pregunta? Lo digo porque es el momento, ¿eh?
We've stunned everybody into silence.
Seriality is one of the things both of you touch, because you start with your paintings, they start with a series of, you start a series or a project, as you said.
Yeah.
And you also have done it, something that both of you have it. I mean, a bit different, but it's something that you haven't really liked. When you start a series, in your case, Fiona, you open it, as you said to me, for 3 years, 4 years, you don't know how long it's going to take you.
Yeah.
No? Could you tell us a bit about it? I mean...
Oh, well, the bits in between series is a terrible, terrible time. I feel desperate and lost, and I think I'm never going to be interested again. And then I just put something down, and something happens. I have an idea, I have another idea. I mess around. Things look terrible in the studio. No one can see them except for trusty Dan. But then I come up with a few rules. I think, okay, like the painting upstairs, Sky Shot, I think, okay, what if the ground was white and black acrylic, and what if all the brush marks were black and white, with maybe a few little color ones here and there, with targets, so that I have a kind of hot abstraction in the black and white moving brush strokes, and I have cold abstraction or cool abstraction, kind of minimalist geometry, and what if they're in confrontation with each other? And then I find that I can work through a number of paintings, exploring all the different possibilities within these sets of rules. And as Michael says, the very constraints of painting are what make it so fantastic, because if everything is possible, like if every time it's the kitchen sink and the cinema down the road and the new car, you can't act. But to limit yourself, to make some rules, then means amazing freedom within that, because you've accepted the parameters of your cage, and within that you can just have a ball.
Yeah.
So,
and in
I think there's something else which is very interesting, because I've just done this retrospective, and I look back at amazement, frankly, at what I've done over my life, and I think, how did I ever do that? And one of the things that's interesting about a series of things is I work in the same kind of way. I have suddenly have an incentive, and that incentive allows me to do a lot of things for a period. What's interesting is, eventually, it dies. It's only alive when you're still discovering something in it.
Yeah.
That is why we don't paint Impressionist pictures. It's not because they failed. We don't paint Impressionist pictures because they resolved Impressionism. They did it. We can only do an Impressionist picture now by doing what they did. That's Impressionism. And they worked out all the difficulties that were involved. When I was a student when pop art began, and it never occurred to people sometimes talk about me like I'm a pop artist. I'm not a pop artist. How could I possibly be a pop artist? It was already established when I was still a student. I knew when I was 23 that I could never be a pop artist because pop art already existed. And then along came minimalism. I'd have loved to have been a minimalist. I couldn't because it already existed. It was already there. All the parameters that define minimalism already existed while I was a student. So if you wanted to go beyond what was there, you had to do something that would follow from that. You couldn't be...
Well, yeah, I think that's what was so nice about you as a tutor at Goldsmiths and the other artists who taught there, is that actually it's a terrible moment to arrive as an art student at an art college and realize that all of that's been done, finished. And unless you go to one of the art schools where you're just doing figure life painting or traditional stuff again, that you have to find your own way. So basically all these art students are in a state of despair and confusion and don't know what to do. And Michael would be very helpful and clear and encouraging in helping describe back to us what it was we'd produced and making a suggestion like, well, that looks good, why don't you try it in black, or why don't you make more of them, try it bigger? Because you have to be guided through this terrible canyon of fusillades and aggression to get the other side and come up with something that starts to be what you can add to the world of art that hasn't quite been done before. Of course, in a sense, it's very hard to do anything completely new, but you can bring to bear your own self and what you have to offer. And the generosity of people like Michael who teach is fathomless, really. I mean, it's just, I'm so grateful that you were so nice to us. And to me, particularly.
I was fascinated by the idea, the realization. First of all, I never wanted anybody to make work like mine. And a lot of artists teach art as though they want everybody to act like them, and I just thought maybe that was crazy. And I realized that everybody arrived at this school already formed, in a sense. They didn't come empty. They had, there was 18 years of life and before that had been through, and each one of them was different. And, we all kind of have a sense that we're probably all completely formed by the time we're 5 years old anyway. And so it was how through what they brought, what they already had in them, was there something that could be surfaced, that could be turned into something that you could call art.
Yeah.
And that the connection was in each individual person. It was not something outside that you brought to them. It was something inside. But you couldn't look for a standard thing. You had to look. Each person had to unfold. And if you look at the people that I taught, and I'm super proud of all the people that I taught, is that they're all completely different. They could not be more different. There's no similarity between any of them, because I was never interested in that. But I was interested in, it was Fiona in relation to who Fiona was, who she could be, what she liked doing. You have to talk about art. You can't talk about art without talking about pleasure. If it is not pleasure, you can't do it. No one can sustain being an artist without pleasure. And there's a way in which pleasure is an intellectually kind of dodgy area, but believe me, without pleasure, it's not sustainable. You can do anything once or twice, but sustaining something, you have to really like doing it. You have to really find, it can be hard work, it can be where you feel miserable part of the time, but there's something generating that which is the sense of pleasure that it gives you, and when you lose it, it's like a drug. You want it again. You want another hit. You want to feel it again.
Come up with another series.
Get another series.
Definitely.
So internationally, I mean, you travel a lot because you're doing shows in New York and France and UK, and hopefully here in Spain. But how you see the situation right now for painting? Because from my point of view, when I go to an art fair, 80% is painting. I mean, I think it's like it's in the highest moment. Or you think not?
Did you say it's in hell or it's in the highest moment?
No, it's in the highest moment.
Oh, highest moment, yeah.
Because, you know, you go to the museums first, the market is strong in the... I mean, sculpture is having a hard time. Video has disappeared.
Yeah.
Installations, big installations.
Photography
is gone. I mean...
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, but you see, I think it comes back to this fact of what painting allows creatively. And it will, and in a sense, it will always kind of fall back into this kind of a role. I mean,
well, I don't know. I suppose I would say that it's quite, the atmosphere is quite different from when I was a student at Goldsmiths, when, as Michael sketched out, and used, the painting was very much done, and actually, as the previous speaker, Delphine, described as well, the death of painting. But I chose to ignore that because I thought, oh, we're all dying anyway, and if painting's dying too, well, you know, in the meantime, might as well enjoy some life in it. And I think that since then, it's become, everything has exploded outwards, especially with social media and computers, that in a way, no one's bothered anymore about whether or not painting's dead or alive. I mean, everything's dead or alive simultaneously. And so I think that there's an incredible freedom now for younger artists and older artists to make whatever kind of paintings they want to make. And the only challenge is, are they any good and are they interesting? Does anyone actually want to look at them? I mean, in the end, without the audience, I mean, if no one wants to look at your work, well, what's the point? But so I think that's the only question. Don't be boring.
Yeah, that's true. So, shall we wrap up, or are we open for any question?
Is there any questions?
If not, okay. We don't hear you. we cannot see from.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Fiona. Gracias, Carolina. Muito obrigado, Delfín. Y nada, vamos a continuar, muchas gracias a todos y a todas. Vamos a continuar esta fiesta de la pintura, pues invitándoos a ver la inauguración de Ángela de la Cruz, de Opening of Ángela de la Cruz en Casal Solleric, y que empieza a las 7, y yo creo que vamos también a disfrutar a una de nuestras artistas pues, más internacionales y nada, muchas gracias y seguimos. Thank you.
Gracias. Thank you. Thank you very much.